White folks thought that by giving us Christianity, that they were giving us something that would keep us docile, that would oppress us. But what man intends for evil, God uses for good. And there's one priest that tells a different story about the Christian faith of African people in America. And that's our discussion today. Hey y'all, welcome to Blacks with Power, where we are emancipating ourselves from mental slavery so that we can lead the movement of Jah people out of Babylon into the promised land. I'm Father Jabril, your host for this show. Thank you for joining us. Subscribe to the show, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, TuneIn. Watch us on YouTube. Click the subscribe button and give a review, give a thumbs up, give a thumbs down. Let me know what you like, what you dislike, so that we can fine tune and refine this show for you. In this episode, I want to introduce you to some foundational things for me, right? This is near and dear to my heart, man. It was back in 2004. Yeah, 2004, when just coming out of Rastafarianism, had been introduced to Ethiopian Orthodoxy, and on a trip I was living in St. Louis, Missouri. Misery loves company. I was living in St. Louis and went to visit my spiritual father. Was living in Kansas City, one of the Ethiopian priests, one of the monks, and on that journey, was able to see a consecration, an ordination, reception rather, of a priest into Orthodoxy, who came out of Roman Catholicism, was converted to Orthodoxy, and was introduced to a Serbian Orthodox priest named Father Paisius Alstu. Now goes by Father Alexei. After his wife passed, he became a monk, and when you take orders of a monk, he took on a new name of the Brotherhood of Saint Moses the Black. I'll put a link to the Brotherhood of Saint Moses the Black in the description. You can find out more. But the book, Wade in the River, the story of the African Christian faith. Right off the bat, you can see how much this book meant to me, because when I finally published my book, if you see, I wanted it to be as similar to in cover layout and design to Father Alexei's as possible, man, because it just had such a profound effect on me. You can find a link to this book on the description. You can get a copy, but it's transformative. So, Wade in the River, the story of the African Christian faith. I met Father Paisius, Father Alexei, in Kansas City, and he leads a reconciliation network that talks about orthodoxy, that talks about the witness of the Christian faith, and he in the course of our conversation, he gave me a copy of this book, so that, as he said, the inspiration of these holy ones may inspire me in my pursuit of the Christian faith. And so, when you talk about the African Christian faith, what he does is he goes back through ancient times, through Old Testament times, through ancient African history, and identifies the icons of the faith who are African, right? He talks about them, talks about the martyrs of the church, talks about how the fathers of monasticism, the first monks, were African people, how some of the defenders of the faith, some of the ones that helped Christianity to survive in its early days, were African people. And he makes the case for how Christianity could never be the white man's religion. Yes, it has taken on that mantra in the West, but if we are students of history, if we are students specifically of Christian history, we would know that it could never be the white man's religion, right? And so, goes throughout the book, and then coming out of the Bible, coming out of Old Testament and New Testament history, coming over to America, coming into the slave period, talking about the deep Christian witness of slaves, of the enslaved. I still am reprogramming myself, right? We talk about emancipating ourselves from mental slavery. I don't like to call our ancestors slaves. Every now and again I slip, because they weren't slaves. They were people. They are people. They were enslaved. And so if you hear me say that, check me on it, correct me. But to the faith of the enslaved, of those who were enslaved, of our ancestors, and how those who so deeply and strongly embraced Christianity were killed by their masters for their Christian witness, right? And he talks about all of those who, or he doesn't list all of them. No one can list all of the people, right, of the American Holocaust, of the Ma'afa, right? But he talks about many of those martyrs, of those cross bearers, of those passion bearers, of those black persons who, by virtue of their faith, were killed by those who did not want to see black people, by white folks who did not want to see black people embrace Christianity to that degree. And so in talking about all of these people who were killed for preaching the Bible, beyond slaves, be obedient to your masters. So those who would dare go beyond that, right? Those who were killed for gathering by the river and baptizing and praying and shouting and singing and marrying people and doing things in Christian fashion that were killed because of their Christian faith. He talks about those who suffered for their Christian witness, right? And if we know anything about Orthodox Christianity, one of the names for orthodoxy is the suffering faith, right? It is that idea that the deep faith of Christianity is born from suffering because we follow Christ, right? And we follow Christ to the cross, as he said, those who wish to come after me, let them deny themselves and pick up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, but those who lose their life for my sake and for the gospel's will save it. And so this idea that the true essence, deep essence of the faith is born out of suffering, right? And so what his premise is that the slave masters wanted to give black folks a docile form of Christianity that would keep them obedient, not to God, but obedient to white folks, obedient to white power, obedient to white supremacy, right? And I want to make that distinction clear, because what we're talking about is not just obedient to their masters, right? They were programming black folks to be obedient to white supremacy, to acquiesce to white power. And so they wanted to give black folks a faith like that. And for many of us, that stuck, right? We got a faith, quote unquote, that kept us in bondage to white supremacy, in bondage to whiteness, in bondage to white power, right? But as Father Alexi argues in Wade in the River, there were those of us that embraced the faith. There is this legacy of African people that embraced the faith in such a way that they were willing to suffer, in meaning to obey God and not man. They were willing to obey God and not white power. They were willing to obey God and not white supremacy. And because of that, they suffered under the hands of white supremacy. But by that suffering, similar to how Christ suffered under the hands of the Romans and under the hands of the Jewish leadership, by their suffering under the hands of white supremacy, under the hands of their slave masters, under the hands of those who were upholding the institution of white power, the faith of African people was transformed into orthodoxy. It was transformed into something deep, something rich, something beyond the Christianity that you found in white society, right? That the enslaved, that our ancestors were cultivated a faith that was deeper, more Christian more authentic, more orthodox than the faith of white society that could abide with such a system of oppression, right? Or that could appease or placate or play nice with such a system of oppression. And so, I really encourage you to read this book, get a copy of this book and read it, because it serves as the backdrop for where my thinking came from, right? So if you want to understand how in the hell did this guy begin thinking like this, right? You read a copy of this book and you begin to understand that there is something special about the Black experience. There is something transformative, transcendent even, about the Black experience. Something transcendent about the authentic witness of the faith, the Christian faith of African people in this country, right? And when we see that, it enables us, helps us to begin breaking free from this dynamic that keeps us in bondage to white power and white supremacy, keeps us in a quote unquote faith narrative that keeps us docile, that keeps us accomplices in our own oppression, and allows us to point in a new direction that is liberating, that is life-giving, that is transformative, that resonates, that resembles in some sort of real way the faith of Jesus Christ. So again, Wade in the River, the story of the African Christian faith. The author is Father Paisius Al-Sul. You will find the links to that in the description of this episode, and hope you get a copy. And I'd love to know what you think. What are your thoughts of the idea that the faith that was cultivated by those who were enslaved, the faith that was cultivated by the oppression that they experienced, by the suffering that they experienced, that faith became the authentic witness of the gospel in America, right? So about that, what do you think of that idea that the faith of our ancestors that was born in slavery became the authentic witness of Christianity, and that it is the authentic witness of Christianity in the West? What do you think about that? And how does that shape your interpretation of your own faith? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. So leave a comment, leave a review, leave a thumbs up, leave a thumbs down. Let me know what your questions are as well, because a charge to keep we have, brothers and sisters, a God to glorify, a never dying soul to save and fit it for the sky. We have come a long way, but Lord knows there is a long way yet to go. So we ain't there yet. So now let us march on till victory is won. Live with power.